Okay, let's get into the Adam Project. The Adam Project is a streaming movie on Netflix. Give you a quick synopsis of it. After accidentally crash landing in 2022, the time traveling fighter pilot Adam Reed teams up with his 12-year-old self for a mission to save the future. Pretty decent reviews so far. It's one of those movies where like anything that drops in Netflix, I feel like these days I inherently usually don't trust. I don't have a lot of faith in them as like a original content creators, because like I feel like they make a lot of good movies and shows, but they throw everything at the wall and like not all of it sticks at all. They're not like very consistent in a way that I think like Hulu is with their shows and movies, or like other streaming network, like HBO Max or whatever. But I think with this movie, I ended up enjoying it way more than I thought I would. It definitely borrows a lot of elements from a lot of previous movies, and like their take on time travel isn't like super original or anything like that. But I think the one thing I took away from this movie is they did a really good job of capturing sort of like a good family lesson of like how important family is, and like your relationship with your parents and all of that. And I think that was really well done. Some solid humor and other stuff as well. We can dive more deep into it, but what are your initial thoughts from you guys?
I think that mainstream audiences are going to love this. I think that it is, and there's the thing with a lot of movies that I see is that I come on here a lot and I have very strong opinions about a lot of stuff. But sometimes you just see a movie that like you're not crazy about, but you acknowledge other people are really going to like. And I think this is one of those movies. Did I really enjoy it a ton? Not particularly. I found it really, incredibly derivative. What was the reason it didn't completely work for me is because I think the sci-fi part of this science fiction movie kind of stinks. I think the action kind of stinks. There's some of the effects are okay. There is a effect, and we'll talk about it later. That is the worst thing I've ever seen. But the parts that work, and it's the parts they needed to get right, was the human elements to it. And Ryan Reynolds is like, he's great in this. And I would say after Deadpool 3, if I'm Ryan Reynolds or if I'm Ryan Reynolds' agent, next step is do something like go for the Oscar. Because I think there's actually like an amazing Oscar caliber performance in there from Ryan Reynolds. I think that he has not played it safe. And that's one of the things I give him credit for. But I think that he's found the niche with the Deadpool stuff and doing, Shawn Levy and him are boys now. I mean, this is going to be, they're about to do 3 movies in a row with him directing Deadpool 3. It's a completely inoffensive movie. It's a good Netflix watch. But as a whole, was it something I got a tremendous amount of enjoyment out of? Not particularly, but it's a weird thing where I do kind of recommend it to mainstream audiences because I think, per usual, they'll get way more enjoyment out of it than I did.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. I think it's definitely a mainstream movie. It feels like a movie that a lot of families will watch. Like you can watch it with your teenage kids and up to grandpa. They might like it. It's got like a real family element to it. But it did blow me out of the water. I may not have watched it if it wasn't my assignment for this episode. But I said that to Jeff. I'm sorry, Kenjac. There was no point where like, oh, I got to shut this off. This is just bad. It just it felt like sort of not a retread of Back to the Future. That's the obvious comparison to make. But like I thought some of the emotional beats weren't really quite earned. Like when Ryan Reynolds is sitting in the bar, and across from Jennifer Garner, his mother, and it kind of gets this kind of serious, and they bring in the heartstring music, and it's like I don't think they didn't really earn it to that point as far as like the characters, like getting to know them much. And also too, I was waiting for like a inappropriate joke because in the previous scene, Jennifer Garner is dating this ugly guy from work. She obviously hasn't gotten the deep dick lately because her husband's been gone. And now she's in a bar and fucking handsome Ryan Reynolds is hitting on her, and she's not like flirting back because I was waiting for it. Because in Back to the Future, when you watch it now, that shit's creepy. Like his own mother's hitting on him. So I thought they were going to kind of lean into that a little bit just because there was so much Back to the Future homage or flavor in the air or whatever. But no, they went the sentimental route. I was kind of hoping they went made it a little bit awkward, but I enjoyed it. It was, like I said, the action, at this point, CGI, when you can do everything, then nothing impresses anymore. But yeah, I stuck it out. I mean, I think, like you said, it'll be popular among the masses, but yeah, I mean, it did blow me away, but there's some enjoyable parts of it.
Yeah. I think we could kind of break down in like what worked and what didn't. We can start with what didn't. And I think the biggest thing was a moment in this, in effect, where it made me literally like it gasp. I was like, it was the de-aging of Catherine Keener in one scene where they show her like her previous self, and it is so shocking how bad it is, and it was so wholly unnecessary because the problem would have just been avoided if you just cast someone younger and dress them up older. Like it would be so fucking easy for them to avoid this problem. But instead of like doing that prosthetic fix, which would have cost them like almost nothing, they instead chose to do a full-on SFX de-aging, which looked horrid and then so bad. That moment, I think, was the moment where I was like, this alone docked the like 10 points off the movie for me.
Going forward, any movie that does that is losing points, because it's one of those things in Hollywood. We got to stop. There's been movies where it's looked okay. Like I remember thinking, I think it was the second Guardians of the Galaxy where they did the de-aging on Kurt Russell and thinking, all right, this looks almost suitable, but it never looks good. It never looks up. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this. The CGI Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, to me, is still a substantially better effect than any of the like de-aging stuff that we've seen. And I'm not even saying that looked very good either, but yeah, it's just, you're right, dude. Why not just have regular Catherine Keener and then Catherine Keener in old age prosthetics? Like, it's such a bizarre distraction. Terrible, terrible effect, man. Going forward, any movie that does that, they're getting bogged rating points. They have to. It takes me out of the movie.
It's fun. I had it written down. This was Catherine Keener's Peter Cushing moment, because it jumps off the screen at you, and it's like, I guess I think it was in the credits it said a body double is a different thing. So I don't know if they have an actress and they put their Catherine Keener's DH face on. I don't know how they do it, but they did say that there was a body standing for her. But yeah, that was kind of like disoriented when you see it. But did you catch that line? I thought I took it as like a subtle dig at like multiverse movies, because when the kid was talking, he's like, no, is it a multiverse? Like, no, it's not a multiverse. Like, you watch too many movies. And I thought, it was like kind of like a dig at Marvel. Nothing bad, but I just kind of jumped out. Also, one good thing, kids might start listening to Led Zeppelin now. There's a lot of classic rock on there. I think it was Good Times, Bad Times, and that kicks in. I'm sure a lot of like people watching the movie don't know that song. I'm like, holy shit, that song kicks ass. So I think sales of Led Zeppelin 1 will probably go through the roof. But other than that, it was a good popcorn movie. And also too, I don't know if you noticed, it was intentional, the scene with Mark Ruffalo when they have him in the classroom. It wasn't, did it to me, or did it, they had him look like, Einstein always looked like he was rumpled with his clothes. He kind of looked like Albert Einstein a little bit, because he was doing like the theory, physics, the quantum theory, whatever, and his hair was a mess. I don't, did you notice that at all? Or is it maybe just be stoned watching it?
I think he's turning into that though. Like with a lot of
real life.
He used to be like, like handsome, rugged Mark Ruffalo. And it seems like post Avengers Endgame, like that's a lot of his roles now. He's got like the hair all disheveled. He looked like a professor though. I mean, I love Mark Ruffalo. He's great. He's great and everything, but yeah.
I think as long as we're talking about other things that were not good specifically about this movie, because there is a lot of good I want to get to eventually. I think that this movie could have really benefited by having one less character. And I think that character probably would have been Zoe Saldana, because if they were able to make more of a connection with the characters like Mark Ruffalo, like the dad, like if they had more time with him versus trying to split that time between him and Zoe Saldana, then I think that this would have been, you would have had more investment, right? And like you would have, like you were saying before, Rear Ad, like they would have been more earned emotional moments because they would have had more of like this character buildup. And I think that having Saldana kind of like distracted from a bit, but I get the idea of like you need her in order to make like the older Adam like have that sort of connection of a reason why he wants to like not fix everything or fix everything. Another thing that I think was kind of weird about this was like the bad guys in this movie seem to sort of like flip-flop on wanting to straight up murder Adam and just be like, yeah, we're gonna come take you home. Like I feel like they're I kind of like couldn't get a gauge on their like aggressiveness or like kind of attitude or whatever you want to call it. And there was, I think that kind of like didn't take me out of it, but definitely like it was a little bit confusing for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. That is funny. I feel like if I watch it again, I'd notice that. One issue I had with it though, and I think what you brought up about the Zoe Saldana character kind of leads into my point, which is that I think the movie often becomes a little bit too bogged down by either too many characters or explaining the science. Like it's very clear this movie is inspired by a lot of the 70s, 80s whimsical Amblin Entertainment Spielberg movies of that era. But like when you watch E.T., E.T. is just an alien. And they give you some backstory about where he's from, but they never really like They never do a full deep dive into his entire backstory. Here, I really felt like they went a little bit too far in trying to show its work regarding the time travel, when I think that time travel is at its best when you have one scene of just simple explanation, or, like Looper did an awesome job with that. Remember the scene in the diner when Bruce Willis is just like, look, dude, fuck it. Like, we could be here all day with sticks and diagrams. Like, I'm here and you're here. Let's do this. I think especially when you're making a movie that's catered more towards families, they went a little bit too far in trying to explain every single minor detail of the time travel, when I think that audiences, myself included, are a little bit more willing to accept when something just is on screen.
Like, what other movies were they trying to like riff off? Because I read a lot of comments. Oh, it reminded me of like science fiction in my youth or whatever. But I don't know. Like Kenjac had mentioned E.T., but I mean, other than like the dog and like when the kid walking in the woods with the flashlight, that was the only like really E.T.-ish type thing I saw. But what other movies did you guys kind of pull from that?
I think the space friend, like running around trying to escape the government bad guys, so to speak, and like the sort of Pacific Northwest-y like look of the or setting, or whatever you want to call it, is what they sort of were drawing from there. Obviously, they drew from Back to the Future, like you were saying, and they even referenced that, right? Like the kid mentions, he's like, "Oh, like Back to the Future," and he's like, "What do you watch too much movies, kid." And they do, like, I think they did reference that a few times. I do want to mention, like I was saying before, some of the things that I thought were kind of good in this, and I think the kid actor in this was really good. And that's the thing where kid actors, if they're bad, they derail a movie. Like, a movie will go in the shitter if it has a bad kid actor, because you're just sitting there like watching it, and it's just like, you have to another hour and 20 minutes into like just watch this kid be shit, and like you can tell if they're bad within like the first 5 minutes. But I thought the kid was really good. He hit like all those comedic notes really well, and I think that he paired well with the sort of Ryan Reynolds-y delivery. And that's another thing that I think was kind of good about this. I think this is the most depth I've seen from a Ryan Reynolds role in like a pretty long time. Like, he's usually sort of like that one note, snappy line, funny dude, but like he got some emotional depth here. I thought he reached the spots he needed to hit, and I kind of like that. And I think that's also I think the biggest or the best thing I took from this movie is I really did like the ending. Like, I thought that the closing 20 was really strong, and I think like the way they kind of wrapped a bow on all these sort of timelines we had going on there, like the father, the kid, and his timeline, and then also the adult. And I think that it really hit a good emotional note there. I was like, it's a movie where, like, I agree with you guys mostly, where it is a popcorn movie. It is like, it's not like reinventing the wheel or doing anything crazy, but like it hit a bit of emotional depth. Like, it got me like not choked up, but like I was like, oh, that's a pretty strong emotional moment. And I think that that's an impressive thing to do for a movie that's like dumped out on Netflix in the middle of March or whatever,
Yeah, well, it's funny that the ending it did borrow from was an '80s movie that had nothing to do with science fiction. It was Field of Dreams, not to be a spoiler, but I mean, they totally. I mean, it was so blatant that they ripped off Field of Dreams, which I know it's a lot of people like it. It wasn't really my cup of tea, but back to Reynolds, like Deadpool kind of seems to be his default now. Like he nailed Deadpool so good that just seems to be like his character now. And like the little kid, I was telling Kenjac before, Chris. I guess the kid. Let's give him some props. Walker Scobell, his name is. This is his first movie he's been in, and I guess he had memorized the script from Deadpool just even before this movie. And there's a clip online of him like reciting all these lines.
Wow,
he was great. Like the first couple of scenes, I'm like, this kid must have just watched Deadpool over and over to kind of get the cadence down. So he was pretty good. And also, like, going back to Reynolds as well. He is capable of more than just doing that, though, because I mean, if you guys see Mississippi Grind, I know you
man, underappreciated movie.
Yeah, him and Ben Mendelsohn, and there was kind of a side and element to his acting. Like, all right, man, this guy has a little bit more range than maybe you think. So, yeah, I'd like to see him maybe do a little more dramatics, but he definitely has this like wise ass, like, that Deadpool shtick down. He can do it like just change the costume, and he can nail it. Plus, he's handsome as hell, so that makes it easy.
Yeah. You know what's funny though about Reynolds is like, he was playing Deadpool a decade before Deadpool ever got made. Like, when you watch basically most of his movies, that's why he was so perfectly cast, and that's why it took Deadpool forever to get off the ground, because everyone knew like nobody else can play this role. And when you go back and watch, like, not everything, like, but a lot of his other movies, he's playing that same shtick, that same character. But much like, I've heard somebody compare him to Chevy Chase in the past. Well, He's not the physical comedian that Chevy Chase was. In fact, nobody is. I think there are some similarities in the fact that, like, they have their shtick. They're both handsome as hell, and yet they're really entertaining on screen. The difference is Chevy Chase, from what I've heard, never met him, is like a notorious asshole.
Huge
And
asshole.
Ryan Reynolds is known for being like one of the nicest people in Hollywood. But I think that's an apt comparison because they play similar roles every time. But you like that guy. They're always charming.
One other movie too we got to mention that they kind of got an homage in there with the Forest Moon of Endor chase with the scout troopers.
Yeah.
With the scene in the woods there, that was definitely a little Jedi homage there too. We got to give that a shout out as well.
For sure, that was like and that was like I think goes back to that Pacific Northwest thing. It's just something about those sort of woods that just it gets like a rise out of me, seeing those ferns or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, I think there's like it's kind of like a weird movie to sort of process because like I think that they didn't do anything nuts from like a sci-fi perspective or like sci-fi action or whatever. Like I think that part, like we're saying, like all these homages to different sort of movies, and like so I think I saw someone refer to the movie as like Amblin Light or something like that because it does really have that sort of feel to it. I don't think it did anything nuts from the sci-fi or action perspective, but I do think that the actual core story, like if you were to remove the time travel elements, like that actual sort of family story and like wanting a kid wanting their dad to spend more time with them, and like a kid wanting to, or a guy wanting to, make sure that he actually meets his wife, and like the concept of time there is so crazy as well. Like her saying, like, what do you call it? Even if we never meet, like we've spent all this time together, like that's all existed. I think there's a lot of cool elements that they sort of explored throughout the movie. I would have ended for me on this movie if I was to rate it 1 out of 100, which is what we do here. I would have given it a 72, and that might be a little high. I think that, but I really think it's a movie where I watched it and I really enjoyed it. And I think it hit an emotional note that I didn't see coming and makes me excited that we're going to get to see. So the director of this, Shawn Levy, is going to be directing Deadpool 3. He also previously directed Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. It makes me excited to see what he can do with Deadpool 3.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice movie, so I'll give it a 69.
Perfect.
Sure. I'd give it an even 60. It's fine. It's there. I don't know if I'd watch it again, but if somebody asked me like, should I watch The Adam Project? I bet they'd like it. Yeah, it's a nice little film. No.
There's something to be said about that sort of movie though, one where you feel comfortable giving it a blanket recommendation, right? Yeah. Like that's not really you can't say that about like almost any movie. Like there's movies that even that I know are like incredible. Like it could be Godfather or whatever, but I know there's people that would not click with Godfather. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like this is a movie where like you could be any age, any gender, any whatever, and like you can enjoy it.
You should cut those people out of your life. Don't like Father. Just get them out though.
I agree. Okay, so I think we all kind of like we're roughly around the same spot. What would you have rated it, Chris?
I gave it a 60.
It was 60. Okay, yeah. So 60 from me, 69 from Rear Ads, 72 from me. Most of the people I would say that, or at least from the reaction I've seen on Twitter from our fans and from our Reddit, whatever else, everyone seems to like be, I would say, mostly surprised. Pleasantly surprised is the best way to put it, because I think a lot of people came into it with very low expectations, and we're kind of pleased, and I think that's a good sign as well.